All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Ed Recker. I am Director of High School Relationship Management with Sally Mae. I'll be your presenter tonight, and I just want to thank NSHSS right off the bat for inviting us to bring this information to you all. And tonight's webinar is all about financial aid offers. So learning more about financial aid offers, their importance, and really how to read them, how to dissect them. Just some housekeeping items for you. So as you probably just heard, we are recording this webinar, so it will be available to you, I believe, possibly as early as tomorrow. I'll also say that even though you are muted, we do want to hear from you. So the Q&A is open. I will be answering Q&A throughout the webinar. So I'll take pauses throughout to answer any questions you may have that you put into that Q&A box. However, I do want to just let folks know that I may defer on some questions because we are going to cover a lot of information this evening. So keep that in mind as we go through. However, again, I do want to hear from you, and I'll definitely answer questions as they arise. So as we move forward, just want to take a look at what is on today's agenda. So we're going to go over what is a financial aid offer. We're also going to talk through some key terms, how schools determine your financial aid offer. We're going to decode it for you. So really, I'm going to teach you how to decode it yourself, more along those lines. And then some other questions going forward. All right. So very first thing, after being accepted to a college and completing the FAFSA, students will receive a notification that outlines how much the school will cost and what kind of financial aid they'll receive. And this includes all sorts of things, like federal, state, and school information. This notification is called financial aid offer. So, why we're here tonight. It's sometimes called a financial aid award or financial aid letter. All of these things refer to the same thing. One important thing to remember is that there is no standard format for this. So you may need to read each document carefully, and I would actually encourage you to read them all carefully. I do also want to let you know that just because they sometimes refer to it as a letter, you may receive a physical letter. Most of the time you will, but sometimes you won't. So not necessarily will you always receive it via the U.S. Postal Service. So they can be delivered via postal mail, as we've said, email through a school email address. So keep that in mind, or even a school portal that you would need your student access for. So you'll want to check all of these avenues. And also remember that students will receive the financial aid offer, not the parent. You'll also want to keep in mind that your financial aid offer will most likely be divided between fall and spring semesters. Cost of attendance, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit, may be provided and usually is provided as an estimate and is sometimes a link to the school's website for additional information regarding the costs to attend that school. You may also need to take action to accept the offer, such as accept it online, or you can decline or modify parts of the offer, such as a loan. All right, so moving forward. So before we move really into the offer, we want to talk about some key terms. And the first thing is how, and some of the key really math behind it, how exactly are how offers determined. It is a bit of a process. So first, to determine if a family is eligible for federal aid, they must complete the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, at studentaid.gov. So families can start applying, at least this year. It was around, November 15th. So it's open right now. And keep in mind that many schools require the FAFSA or some other supplemental application for institutional aid, like the CSS profile. So keep that all in mind. Once you fill out the FAFSA, you can check the status of it immediately. Keep in mind that only the student can do this because the FSA ID is required to log in. And the status will be most likely one of the following. So it's going to say it's processing, that the application is still in process. So that takes about 3 to 5 days to process. It's been processed successfully. That means it's complete and no further action is required. It may be missing signatures. So if a student or a parent forgets to sign it, that could be a status update. And then action required could also be the last one. So if you see that, you'll want to contact your school to resolve the issue or issues that are out there. And so this is a lot of times a common misconception. It's actually one of our questions in the chat already. So a lot of people think that once they complete the FAFSA and that it says that it's processed successfully, that they'll be able to see their financial aid offer. And unfortunately, that's not correct. A lot of times folks will see that and they think they're good to go. But all that really means is that the U.S. Department of Education has processed the FAFSA and they've sent that information to the school. So they send all of the FAFSA information and most importantly, the student aid index number or SAI. From there, schools will subtract the SAI from the cost of attendance to help determine financial need. And then from there, they determine what types of aid and how much aid a student is eligible for. Keeping in mind that when schools look at or determine a financial aid offer, they take into consideration all of that information on the FAFSA. So, and in addition to what they have, so cost of attendance, family income, family size, and so forth. We're going to move on now. And I also see, well, one more question in the chat. And unfortunately, it's a question about a specific question on the FAFSA. Unfortunately, I'm not able to drill down into it at this point. It looks like it says something about parents filing married jointly, however, only one parent has income. It should only ask for the one parent income. If it says something along the lines of parent one, parent two, and you only have income from one parent, you should be able to just put 0 in that parent two income. So without being able to see it and drill down into it, hopefully that helps. So as we move forward, we're going to cover some of the key terms that are oftentimes thrown around by financial aid folks. One of the things I didn't mention about myself, I'd mentioned that I was with Sallie Mae, but prior to joining Sallie Mae, I had spent over 15 years on the college and university side, almost entirely in financial aid. And I had multiple stops as a director of financial aid. So I know this stuff pretty darn well, but one thing that I want to remind folks of is you're going to run into a lot of ed records through your higher education path working with financial aid. Hopefully this is a good thing. But one thing even ed record did on occasion, which I'm not terribly proud of, is financial aid folks love their acronyms. And you're going to see a couple of them on the screen right here. If financial aid folks ever throw out an acronym that you don't know or you don't understand, do not hesitate to raise your hand and just say, hey, I'm not sure what that is. Can you please explain it to me? And they're more than happy to do that for you. So with that being said, we're going to go through some of the key financial aid terms. So we're going to start with cost of attendance, or COA. COA is the estimated cost to attend for one academic year, fall through spring. Depending on the student's enrollment status, it may include tuition and fees, books and supplies, food and housing, transportation, and personal expenses. Keep in mind that COA will vary from school to school, and schools will probably adjust their COA yearly to reflect changes to any of the elements that make up their particular COA. The student aid index number, which I mentioned earlier, or SAI, is a number calculated according to a formula established by law using the information from the FAFSA. Schools use the SAI to determine federal student aid eligibility and the financial aid offer, and states and colleges will often use it for the same purpose as well. Also, your SAI isn't the amount of money your family will have to pay for college. And it isn't the amount of federal student aid you'll receive. Think of it more as a guidepost that helps schools to determine what types and how much aid to offer you. A question we oftentimes get about the SAI is that does it change from school to school? And it does not. It stays static. That thing's going to be the same from from a 2-year to a 4-year school to even a trade school. So keep that in mind as well. And I'm going to pause right here. It looks like we've got some folks that aren't seeing the screen. I am going to, gang, I apologize. This is going to look a little wonky, but I am going to just do a little bit of troubleshooting here. Make sure that I'm sharing my screen, and then we're going to pick right back up. So bear with me just a moment. All right. My apologies for that, folks. Apparently, I forgot to put the share screen on there. So everyone, please accept my apologies. Good thing we're only a couple of slides in. So hopefully, again, hopefully that wasn't too disruptive. Uh, we didn't get too deep in this. So I apologize for that. We're just going to keep moving on though. So now that you can see the screen, I'd mentioned cost of attendance, I'd mentioned student aid index. Let's talk about special circumstances. Uh, Special circumstances, it's exactly what it sounds like. If your family encounters a financial crisis that's not reflected on the FAFSA, you should contact the financial aid office at each school you're considering. Examples of events that may be considered for special circumstances include things like a loss of a job, separation or divorce, death of a parent or spouse, or extraordinary out of pocket medical expenses. Each school could handle these situations differently, and they're not necessarily required to make adjustments. You also might see a note on your FAFSA submission summary indicating you've been selected for something called verification, and that's our next term. Or your school may notify you of this. It's a process the school must go through to confirm the information on your the information on your FAFSA is accurate. Your school will notify you of the documentation you'll need to submit, but generally speaking, these tend to be few and far between anymore. Um, and it's usually pretty quick and painless. So don't think of it as you've done anything wrong. Sometimes the Department of Ed just needs to know that information. So I'm going to pause here and again apologize. Sorry about that, folks, about not sharing my screen. That was a big time rookie mistake. So I apologize for that. But I'm going to answer some questions here. So, question, which high school year can we apply for FAFSA? So you're going to want to be, a senior in high school. So as of right now, if you are planning to attend college or university primarily next fall. So when I say primarily, there are a lot of states that do dual enrollment. I'm located in Ohio. They call it College Credit Plus here, some type of early college. So you have to, if you're graduated from high school and you're moving on to college, and college is your primary, that's when you would complete the FAFSA. So if you're looking to attend college in fall of 2025, you're going to want to do it right now. So generally speaking, senior year in high school. So next question, what if you aren't planning on using certain aspects of the COA, like housing and transportation? So even if you aren't planning on using those, so for example, you plan on commuting, you're going to live with your parents, and you don't really plan on having a vehicle. That's by and large, that's okay. But by law, per the U.S. Department of Education, colleges and universities have to add that in to your cost of attendance. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, and actually, in a lot of ways, it's a good thing for you. But just keep that in mind. So, not a bad thing, probably a good thing, and also keep in mind, cost of attendance is not your bill. That isn't something that you're expected to pay. That's just what they are anticipating, that if you used all of those things within those categories, that's what they would budget it as. All right. Okay, so it looks like we have a question. A FAFSA was filled out for the daughter, and we're only seeing the names of the parent. So the FAFSA is pretty unique now, where it is role based. So what that means is that a parent can't complete the whole thing. So the student needs to fill out their portion, and then the parent needs to fill out their portion. So if you filled out your portion as the parent or as the student, but the parent or the student didn't fill out their portion, that's probably why you're not seeing the other's information. The other reason is that it will only show the information of the person whose role is you've logged in as. So if you're the parent, you're only going to see questions for the parent. If you're the student, you're only going to see questions for the student. So that's probably that could be why as well. All right. So another question, you mentioned FAFSA sends info to schools. Some have received them, but others still show as missing on their student portal 2 months after filing. Any advice as what steps to take? So I'm guessing that those schools actually have received your FAFSA information. My bet is that they just haven't acted on it yet. And this goes back to that whole um, even though it says it's been processed by the Department of Education, the school isn't showing anything. It's probably because they just haven't gotten around to processing yet. And a lot of times that has to do with waiting on states to determine what types of aid and how much they're going to be extending, or even the school themselves. So my advice to you would be you can always just be patient. But if you really want to know, hey, did they receive my information? I would encourage you to reach out to that financial aid office, email them, call them, just ask. They'll be happy to let you know. And that way, if they haven't received it, you can start chasing it down, doing some troubleshooting, like making sure that the school was entered on the FAFSA, because they won't receive your information unless you put the school on the FAFSA. All right. When does verification happen? Are you notified about verification within 1 month after the FAFSA is completed or submitted? The answer to that is you will know very, very quickly if you've been selected for verification. It may actually show up on your FAFSA submission summary, which you get literally within days of the FAFSA completed, but the school will also notify you. Again, that percentage of students being selected anymore is very, very low. So I would say especially if you've already received a financial aid offer, odds are you have not been selected for verification. All right, for clarification purposes, should we expect to get a financial aid package from each school accepted to? The answer to that is yes. Now, some will do them very, very quickly. Some will wait. We tried to time this webinar based on when you should start seeing those financial aid offers. So, just general rule of thumb: private institutions tend to get them out a little bit sooner than state institutions. Private institutions on a normal year, when the FAFSA would have opened on October 1st, I mean, I have seen them as early as Thanksgiving. State schools tend to hold off because their funding is partially based on what the state gives them per student. So that's something that oftentimes states will wait as late February, mid-March until you get it. All right, what does a negative number for SAI mean? So that's a really good question. A negative number just means that the student is demonstrating a high level of need. It, again, doesn't represent a bill. It doesn't represent what the student will actually pay. It just means that the student is representing a high amount of need. It will qualify them for pretty much maximum aid, which is definitely a good thing. All right. Last question on this, and then, I'll answer a couple more. So if I plan on going to college for fall of 26, but I'm already a senior, do I need to do the FAFSA for 25, 26 or 24, 25? So if you plan on going in the fall of 2026, you can actually just wait. You won't need to fill out the FAFSA until October 1st. That's going to be that's the FAFSA that you want to fill out. So if you fill out 2425 or 2526, then really, I mean, it's good practice, but it's not going to go anywhere. All right, I'm going to answer two more questions and then I'm going to move on here, gang, and I will try to answer as many questions as I can. So um, we have a student who applied early action, was accepted to all 5 universities, but we haven't gotten anything from them. Is that unusual? So, oh my goodness, you're making me think about the difference between early action and early decision. So I would recommend you reaching out to those schools and just asking them when they plan on packaging their aid, because oftentimes they will extend admission both in early action and early decision without any type of aid determination. So you're going to want to reach out to them and just ask them, hey, when is this coming? Because even applying via early action, they will send you an award offer. All right, and then the last one before I move on, what if we have more than 20 schools? Can we add more? So you can, but you're going to have to take some off of that list of 20. Now, keep in mind that the schools on that initial list of 20, that has those schools have received your FAFSA. So you can take them off and you can put different ones on, and it's not going to matter. The school's not going to be offended because they won't know that you took them off, and that's no big deal. All right, gang, I want to keep her moving here. So we're going to move on. So we've talked quite a bit about FAFSA here. So one of the things we always say is submit it as soon as possible. So judging on the questions, I think a lot of folks have already submitted it, which is definitely a good thing. So that's via studentaid.gov. I also want to remind everybody that almost every student is eligible for some form of financial aid. And we're going to go through that when we break down the offer. So keep in mind that there aren't income thresholds. There isn't an income ceiling, if you will, when it comes to federal student aid and financial aid. Everyone's going to be eligible for something, even if it's just federal student loans. And if you don't want federal student loans, again, that's fine. You can always decline them. But I always encourage folks, especially your first year of college, fill out that FAFSA. Make sure that you're not leaving money on the table. And there are also some scholarships that are contingent on your completing the FAFSA. So it really does behoove you to do so. Also, just a reminder that the FAFSA must be filed every year, students in college. So it's not one and done for all 4 years. You have to fill it out every year because people's situations change from year to year. And then also keep in mind that financial aid deadlines aren't the same as college admission deadlines. So that's really, really important, especially as we're starting to approach a lot of financial aid deadlines. Some of them are probably here and past. A lot of times those deadlines are usually like February 1st or February 15th or March 1st. Those are priority deadlines. So we encourage folks to hit those deadlines, and those are going to be different from admissions deadlines. All right. So we've talked about federal aid and we've talked about state aid for financial aid, but we haven't talked about institutional aid. So oftentimes schools will extend their own types of aid, whether it be grants or scholarships. And depending on the school, you as the student may need to complete some additional steps for those. So one is potentially the CSS profile. And I always make kind of the bad joke, and realistically, there is no good financial aid humor. It's all bad humor. That you will need to complete the CSS profile. So sometimes that's required. You may also be required, that may be required for both citizens and non-citizen applicants. And gang, I just embarrassed myself because I was going to make a really bad joke and then I forgot it and I just moved on. So the joke's on me, I guess. There we go. So I guess what I'm saying is, oh, that's what my joke was. You will know if it's a CSS profile school. The school will let you know. There's no guessing about that. They will absolutely let you know if you need to do a CSS profile. So keep that in mind. If you're wondering, oh my gosh, did I miss something? Do I have to fill out the CSS profile? The school will absolutely let you know. And if they haven't let you know, that means that they're not a profile school. All right. So we're going to go through this slide and then I'm going to answer some more questions. So a big piece of determining financial aid eligibility is really determining financial need. And it's actually a pretty simple formula, and it's exactly what you're seeing on the screen there. So it's cost of attendance, so that's COA. You're going to subtract your student aid index number. So you subtract that, but then also if there's any additional free money, so any scholarships, grants, things like that, anything after that is going to determine your financial need. So if that's a positive number, you have financial need. If it's a negative number, you won't have financial need, and that'll help determine what types of aid that you're eligible for. So, all right, I'm going to answer some more questions here. So, all right, if dad's income in 2024 has dropped a lot since 23, should that be mentioned in special circumstances? So the short answer is yes, absolutely. That is something that is a textbook special circumstances situation that that I would absolutely mention, bring up with the financial aid office, because that's something that they'll be able to take into consideration when reviewing and evaluating for financial aid. Um, Similar question. Parents made a lot more in 2023 than they do currently. Yep, same thing. Special circumstances. Uh, so at that point, you would contact the school and ask them for a special circumstances application. All right. Is financial need based on parents' finances? If yes, why? So financial need is partially based on a parent's finances. So basically everything that you put on the FAFSA helps contribute to that student aid index number, or that SAI. Part of that is parent financial information. The short answer as to why is because that's part of the FAFSA formula. That is what has been codified by the FAFSA Simplification Act. Candidly, that's something that really, I mean, I'm not sure that I can answer beyond that. I don't know why, other than that it's part of the formula and it's part of that congressional act. So it might be a little bit of a cop-out answer, but at that point, I would encourage you to reach out to your local congressperson because that was something that was prescribed by Congress. Do you have any other resources if my preferred school doesn't use CSS profile? No, I mean, I think as long as you fill out the FAFSA, you're good to go there. So really it's, my bad joke gone bad was if they don't use the profile, you don't have to worry about it. Just complete the FAFSA. All right, next question. Parental taxes are already filed for 2024, but this time they included their son's income. Will this be considered as total income? So the short answer is if the son's income was, it sounds like included in the parent's income, that could be a problem, but that won't be a problem until next year. So when you fill out the FAFSA, it's actually looking at taxes filed. No, I'm sorry. It will be reflected for, no, it won't. I'm sorry. It won't be reflected until next year. So you just filled out your 2024 taxes. Those are not the taxes that are going to be used for the upcoming or for the current FAFSA. They're actually going to be using the 2023 taxes. So this is something that you may want to kind of keep in your back pocket and think about for the next year. And if you use the tax professional, I would ask them for rationale behind that. I am not a tax professional. I do not give tax advice, but something seems a little bit amiss there. So next question, are non-citizens eligible for the FAFSA? So the weird answer is eligible non-citizens are eligible for the FAFSA. So what that really means is like a green card holder. Those are folks who are eligible for the FAFSA. If you do not have a green card, so if you're not a permanent non-resident, then unfortunately you are not eligible for the FAFSA. All right, so very specific question. When I select the My Aid tab, I get that I've not received any federal aid. Do I have to wait until I have started university to see something appear there? Yes. So that is only going to show aid that has actually dispersed to you and you have received. That will not happen until you enroll and those funds are dispersed to you. So, all right, good questions, gang. All right, we're going to keep moving on here. So we do have a sample financial aid offer for you here. We're going to go through this step by step, all right, to really help you drill down into it. So again, we talked about this earlier. Schools sometimes refer to these as awards or offers or letters. Just know they're all the same thing. Also keep in mind that there's no standard format for these. So this is a pretty basic example. Actually, I think this is a nice clean example. But a lot of schools will have it branded with their school logo and colors. And a lot of schools have this set up as a 2 to 4 page booklet at this point in time. So with that being said, there should be some common elements throughout. And again, we're going to go through each one of these. How much 1 year of college will cost? So again, this is that cost of attendance. And this could be a little tricky, but we're going to go through that. The financial aid the school's offering. And the hope is that, similar to this, the schools will separate the aid into sections similar to what we have on the screen, as there can be a big difference in free money, earned money, and borrowed money. And then any remaining balance or gap or out of pocket that will need to be covered through other sources. Another thing to look for is that some schools will count all aid toward covering any remaining balance. Although all aid can be used to cover a remaining balance, it's up to the student and their family as to whether certain types of aid should be used to cover the remaining balance. And gang, I'm talking specifically about loans. So keep that in mind. Uh, so again, I don't want anybody to walk away from this scared and say, "Oh my gosh, it sounds like everything's going to be different. Schools are going to name things differently, and everything's going to be looking different here." They are going to look slightly different, but realistically, a lot of the naming conventions are going to be the same. Schools can do this differently, but for the most part, they try to keep it somewhat consistent. So keep that in mind. We're going to go through all of these slides. So some of the steps you should know to reviewing your aid offer. First, we strongly encourage creating a spreadsheet or using some comparison tool to review the financial aid offers that you've received due to their not necessarily being a standard format. So there are a lot of resources out there. You can make one via a spreadsheet, or you can do a quick Google search on comparing financial aid offers. And odds are you're going to find free resources out there that will allow you to use them, and you don't have to recreate the wheel. But the first thing you're going to want to do when comparing is identify what aid is gift aid, and that's aid you won't have to pay back, versus loans and what you'll have to earn via a work aid or self-help aid. You'll also want to find your out-of-pocket cost. So as we've said, hopefully schools will clearly have your total cost of attendance listed, but if not, add up your total college costs. So we're talking tuition, fees, food and housing, transportation, books, and personal expenses. Once you have all of that, subtract your total grants and scholarships, and that's sometimes called gift aid. Another good tip would be to check to see if these are renewable yearly so that you'll have an idea of what your out of pocket will be for future years as well. From there, subtract your gift aid. So again, scholarships and grants from your cost of attendance, and that'll be what you need to pay for 1 year of college. Once you get to this point, you'll be able to do an apples to apples comparison of the offers you receive from multiple schools. I want to be careful, and what I'm absolutely not saying is that when we talk about last step on the slide is make your decision. We're not saying that you should go with the least expensive or the least that'll the one that will cost you the least out of pocket. Price and cost are definitely factors, but there are always other factors when deciding where to go to school. So we encourage students to discuss their options with the key people in their lives and weigh all the factors in addition to cost, like type of school, location, academic programs, before making a decision where to attend. And then we always need to remind you, please remember that students receive the financial aid offer and not the parents. All right. So we're going to move right along here. All right. So we're going to start breaking down this award offer. And as we discussed, a key part of comparing aid offers is determining what the cost of attendance is. Some schools will have it clearly spelled out, just like this example, with all the corresponding elements on that award offer. So people will often ask, what happens if they don't have the cost of attendance on their offer? What if they only have things like school bills, things like the school bills directly, like tuition and fees, housing and meal plan, and books? Or in the least likely scenario, what if they don't have any cost information on the award offer? So that does happen. However, you can obtain it in a couple of ways. Most schools will have that information posted on their website, either on their financial aid page or their student accounts, cashier's office, bursar's office page. If you'd like a more direct approach, you can always call or email the financial aid office at the school and say, hey, I need to know what your cost information is. Although some of the schools may not have all of their costs set yet, they should be able to give you a good estimate on each of the elements. All right, so we talked a little bit about gift aid or grants and scholarships, and that's what you're seeing on the screen right now. The reason we call it gift aid is that it's free money that doesn't need to be paid back, kind of like a gift. Grants, which do not require repayment, are typically awarded annually based on information provided on the FAFSA. They are offered by numerous sources such as federal and state governments, colleges, and independent organizations. Although numerous grants are state and school specific, there are two major federal grants I'd like to touch on quickly: the Federal Pell Grant and the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or FSEOG. The Federal Pell Grant is a need-based grant. So again, we talk about that unmet need. That's where this comes into play. And those are awards up to $7,395 for the current academic year and are awarded to all who qualify. So couple points before we move on with that. So I mentioned the $73.95 for the current academic year. The U.S. Department of Education has not released what the upcoming federal Pell Grant amounts will be. So we don't know. But realistically, worst case scenario, it tends to stay flat. Best case scenario, it'll go up. So keep that in mind. I also refer to the federal Pell Grant as kind of really a bottomless pit grant. So as I mentioned, it's awarded to all who qualify. So if you qualify for it, regardless of when you fill out the FAFSA, you will get that. Now, FSEOG, or sometimes called SEOG, those are a little bit different. Those are awarded to students with exceptional financial need. These awards can range anywhere from $100 all the way up to $4,000 and are awarded on a first come, first served basis. So those definitely mean a couple of things. One, there are limited funds available. So you can't, you have to file early to help ensure that you will potentially be eligible for it. And then once that money's gone, it's gone. And each school has a certain allocation. But once they've exhausted that, then those funds are expended and they're no more available at that particular school. And that's why we always strongly encourage folks to file their FAFSA as early as they come, because those funds are first come, first served. When we talk about state grants, so we do have a generic state grant on here. State grants can be a little bit tricky because the criteria and the process will vary from state to state. However, generally speaking, states do have a deadline, so make sure you check with your state Department of Education to see once what that deadline is. And we've got one question in the chat here I'm gonna answer before we move on. If you attend summer session, will it be included in financial aid? So, summer sessions are interesting, just because schools, generally speaking, will only award for two terms, generally speaking, fall and spring. So if you plan on attending a summer session, you can receive aid for that. But what I would strongly encourage you to do is reach out to that financial aid office, let them know. Summer is also odd because it could be one of two different FAFSAs. So you'll also want to reach out to the financial aid office to ask them, hey, which FAFSA year is this coming off of? And they'll let you know, so you make sure that you complete the correct FAFSA for that. Um, so all right, we have a very specific question about Pell Grant eligibility. And gang, I'm not going to go into depth on that. What I would say, it has to do with household income and Pell eligibility. I would encourage the member who put this question out there. It's not that I'm avoiding it. It's just that I'm not, without doing legitimately a hand calculation based on your very unique situation. I can't really answer it in an informed manner. So I would encourage you to reach out to your financial aid office, and they should be able to help you out there. All right. So if you're going to an out-of-state school, how do you determine if you should file for a state grant? So oftentimes, out-of-state schools, if you are a resident of a certain state and you're going to school in another state, oftentimes, unless that state has specific grant reciprocity, I say that grant won't travel. So oftentimes, part of getting a state grant is the incentive is to stay in your state to go to school. There are some exceptions. So I had mentioned I live in Ohio. Ohio actually has a reciprocity agreement with Pennsylvania and vice versa. Oftentimes those state grants are triggered by the FAFSA. So I would encourage you to, first and foremost, always complete the FAFSA. But then secondly, I would also check with your State Department of Education's website. It'll often show the criteria. And if you're still unsure, reach out to that financial aid office. So next question, and then I'm going to move on. These financial aid offers are for only 1 year. To eliminate the guesswork, can the college let you know upfront how much the student will have to pay each year for the next 4 years of undergraduate college? So sadly, I'm going to give the financial aid answer of it depends. So it really depends on the school. Oftentimes they will have like tuition locks that guarantee what you paid in your first year is what you will pay every year. However, a lot of schools don't do that, largely because everyone's financial situation has the potential to change from year to year. So you can always ask the school. I would always encourage folks to do that. But at the same time, it's just going to depend because of exactly what I said. Situations will change from year to year. So, all right, I'm going to move on here. We want to keep moving. So I'd mentioned work aid or employment options. So after you determine your net cost, or in our example, the school gives you that net cost, it will start to present options, it being the financial aid offer, on how to pay any remaining balance. One of those options may be federal work study, and that's a need-based federal aid program. Although not listed in our example, actually it is listed in our example. There we go, federal work study. The institutional aid program isn't. Some schools may also offer their own work program. Now, what's the difference between those? Federal work study is federal work study provides part-time jobs to students as part of their financial aid offer. Work isn't free. I mean, I think we all know that. but it doesn't have to be repaid. So we do consider this self-help aid as it's typically used to cover indirect costs. Uh, if you decide to participate in a work program, make sure you find out if the school will assign you a position or if you have to find it on your own. A couple of other things that you can see on the screen. These positions can be on or off campus. They will pay at least minimum wage. They are going to have limited hours because remember, you're a student first. They can be tied to academic interests or majors, although they aren't necessarily. And there are often a wide variety of jobs on each campus. And the last thing, and maybe the most important thing, is students will receive a paycheck for their work. So if you don't work, you don't get paid, and you get paid over time. So if a school offers you, say, $3,000 in federal work study, that's not going to be directly applied to your bill. That's something that you will earn over time via that paycheck. All right. So the next option for paying any remaining balance are federal student loans, and we have the two major types outlined here. And these loans are provided by the government and must be paid back with interest. Those two types for undergraduate students are federal direct subsidized loans and federal direct unsubsidized loans. The borrower is not billed for interest for the federal direct subsidized loan during the in-school period or grace, or what's called a post-school deferment. So long story short, if you take out a federal direct subsidized loan, um, you won't have any interest accrue while you're in school. You borrow $3,500, you'll owe $3,500. In federal direct unsubsidized loans, the borrower is responsible for paying the interest during the in-school period or grace or post-school deferment. Also, some schools may include a federal Parent Plus loan in this section, but keep in mind, and we're going to talk a little bit more about plus loans in a bit, this is not a student loan. It's a loan solely in the parent's name and has very different rates, fees, and features. You want to pay close attention to this and note it within your comparison. And also keep in mind that when we start talking about the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loan, that has to do with that unmet need. In order to get a subsidized loan, you have to demonstrate unmet need, or you won't be eligible for it. The next question we usually get has to do around borrowing limits, and the U.S. Department of Education has annual and aggregate limits on how much a student can borrow through these programs. So with an undergraduate student, between the two programs, so it could be a combination of subsidized and unsubsidized each year. So first year of undergrad, $5,500. Second year, $6,500. Third and final years, $7,500 each year. Keeping in mind that you can't exceed $31,000 for an undergraduate degree, and only $23,000 of that can be can be a subsidized loan. Also, keep in mind that borrowers are charged an origination fee. So you'll see that origination fee on the screen. These are fees that are subtracted from the loan prior to disbursement. However, the borrower will have to pay back the entire amount, including the origination fees. Schools receive the loan proceeds minus the origination fee, so the borrower does not get the full amount they borrowed. So we're going to do simple math here. You borrowed $1,000. The origination fee is just over 1%, ever so slightly. So we're just going to say it's 1%. If you borrow that $1,000, $990 will be applied to your student account. That's how much the Department of Ed sends to the school. That's how much that they're going to apply to the student account. So again, that's that origination fee. Also, borrowers are afforded one 6-month grace period. Interest accrues throughout the grace period and is capitalized at the end of grace. Borrowers can pay the interest at any time up until the end of grace to avoid any interest capitalization. And lastly, there are various repayment periods, anywhere from 10 to 25 years, and there are several different deferment options, including in-school economic hardship and military deferment, depending on your situation. All right, I'm going to pause there. We're going to answer some questions here. So we have a question about the FAFSA. We filed the FAFSA and used our 23 information. We just filed taxes and made quite a bit less. Do we update the FAFSA and reach out to the schools? So you're part right. You do not update your FAFSA because that's pulling straight from the IRS. So you can't really update your FAFSA there. But I would reach out to your school and let them know, hey, our income dropped. That's one of those special circumstances situations. So good question. Can you have federal work study? Can you have federal work study and still pay money to the school during that specific year? Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely have federal work study where you can earn those funds over time. And it's possible that you would still have a balance due. You would still want to pay the school. That's something that the school may allow you to do over time. And we're going to talk about different options for paying any remaining gap as well. So next question, is it true that if you work that the is it true that if you work any income lowers the amount of aid and grants the students will receive from college? That is largely not true. So for students especially, they have within the FAFSA formula something that's called the income protection allowance. I believe for students this year, it is just under $10,000. So it hovers right about $9,500. What that means is a student can earn up to $9,500 during that year and it not have any impact on their financial aid eligibility. So keep that in mind. I'm always a big believer in summer jobs and things of that nature. So if they cross into five figures, yes, anything above that income protection allowance will be counted within the formula. It's not a dollar for dollar thing. It could impact aid eligibility, but by and large, we're not talking about usually a tremendous impact unless they have a really good paying job. How does work study impact taxes and future aid? So from a taxes perspective, again, I'm not a tax professional, but it's taxed like any other income would be. Future aid, it does not have an impact on it. That is one of the things that is pulled over from the IRS is that you received income from a work aid program, and at that point, it does not count towards the federal formula. So that's another benefit of getting work study. All right. Last question before we move on. Will any or all of this process change if the Department of Education is shuttered, as is currently being threatened by the president's nominated Secretary of Education? That's a really good question to which I don't have an answer to. I think right now, we are really in a lot of wait and see. My gut is telling me that, and this is just Ed Recker talking, that even if we do see changes to the Department of Education, any changes to the FAFSA are actually dictated by Congress. So the FAFSA formula itself, the FAFSA itself, the opening on October 1st, now moving forward, that's all been codified by Congress. So in order for the FAFSA to completely go away or the formula to change, that needs to go through Congress. Can it happen? Absolutely, it can happen. Will it happen? Time will tell. So I know that was me saying really nothing and a whole lot at the same time. But all I can really say is just hold tight and hey, tune in next year. We might have some more information, but as of right now, it is the status quo with the FAFSA. All right, we're going to move on here and we're going to talk about the remaining balance and how to potentially cover that remaining balance. So this slide illustrates the difference between the cost of attendance and minus gift aid. So again, minus those scholarships and grants and the financial aid awarded. So work programs and federal student loans. It's going to show that remaining balance. And keep in mind that there are a number of different ways that you can cover this gap. So some of the options are you can always hunt for more scholarships. Keep looking for scholarships. A lot of people will pay some of it with their savings. Some will do tuition payment plans that allow them to pay it over time. Some will take out private student loans, a federal Parent Plus loan, uh, and potentially even a private parent loan. Um, I do want to point out before we move forward, though, that some offers may show a zero balance. This may indeed be the case, but this is part of the reason why we're having this webinar. We really encourage you to look closely and see what aid is included to get you to that zero balance. And this is where, gang, I hate to say it, but some schools will do some creative math, or they'll subtract some things they probably shouldn't, to get you to think that attending their university or college is less expensive than it really is. And what I mean by that is these schools will put into the aid package a federal Parent Plus loan or a private loan to cover that gap, and then show a zero balance. Please be aware of what aid is being offered to get to that zero balance, as it can be misleading. All right. So I wanted to give a little more information about some of those various ways to cover the balance, like we've talked about. So we're going to talk about the free money first, which really is those outside scholarships. Outside scholarships are awarded by an outside party. So think about community foundations, um, other philanthropic organizations, things of that nature, and they'll award free money based on things like academic achievement, financial need, community involvement, organization membership, sports, talent or skill, leadership or school activities, religious affiliation, and really the list goes on and on. Really, it can be awarded based on what makes you unique. And students need to make sure to ask their school how they apply outside scholarships, because it can be added on or will reduce their other financial aid. So keep that in mind. All right, let's see what else here. Other options include college or other savings plans like 529 plans, Coverdell savings accounts, or other savings earmarked for college expenses. 529 plans and Coverdell savings accounts are money saved that can be used for any qualified higher education expense, including tuition, fees, and certain food and housing costs. Earnings grow tax deferred and are free from federal income tax when used for qualified higher education expenses. With that being said, we do encourage you to please consult with the tax advisor regarding these types of accounts. The other two options available to cover remaining balances are tuition payment plans, as well as private and federal Parent Plus loans. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about tuition payment plans, and then I'm going to answer some questions here. So students themselves will often schools themselves will often offer tuition payment plans to help cover any remaining balance. These plans allow you to spread your payment out over time, typically over a semester or academic year. These plans may have fees or interest charges that vary by school, so check with your school regarding their particular plans. For parents, keep in mind that you may have costs today while your student is at home or in high school that you can allocate towards college costs. Think costs associated with sports or extracurricular activities that you can allocate towards college. Tuition payment plans typically allow you to make monthly payments over a number of months, and that's determined by the school, rather than make a lump sum payment. There is typically a fee to participate in the program, which varies by school. All right, now we are going to talk about, or we're going to check on some questions here. Can you pay off the net price for the university with the SAI? So the answer to that is no. So the SAI, the Student Aid Index number, is really meant to be a guidepost. So that's just a number that helps the school determine what types and how much of aid you're eligible for. So the SAI doesn't represent an actual dollar amount or anything that you can use to pay off a balance. So are outside scholarships taxable? So the answer to that is maybe. So and really it's about a totality of scholarships. So as it currently sits, a student has to pay taxes on any scholarship if it exceeds tuition and fees. So from that perspective, if you received a full tuition and fee scholarship from the university, you receive outside scholarships that would then help pay for things like housing and meal plan, then the answer would be yes. But if you receive scholarships and they don't cover tuition and fees, they're only covering, or I should say, they don't cover all of it, they're just covering a portion of it, then no, it would not be taxed. And then the last question before we move forward, if we have a Florida prepaid plan but is attending a university out of state, what does that mean? So Florida prepaid, I love it because it's really just a clever name for a 529 account. It is a college savings account. It really has nothing to do with prepaying for a university in Florida. So the short answer is yes, you can use that anywhere, at any qualified school in the U.S. But Florida does a great job of kind of marketing itself to say, hey, it's Florida prepaid, which I mean, technically it is, but it's also prepaid for any college or university. So great questions, gang. Great questions. So we're going to get a little bit in the weeds here about covering that remaining gap with loans. So we're going to talk about private loans first. Private student loans are a loan where the student is the borrower, but families can share the responsibility with the student when a creditworthy individual co-signs for a private student loan. Some lenders offer the option to defer payments while the student is in school, but interest accrues during this time and is added to the loan's principal amount when the deferment period ends. That's called capitalization, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. A federal direct parent plus loan is a federal loan for parent borrowers. Repayment typically begins immediately, but parents may elect to defer payments while the student is in school. But interest accrues during the time and is added to the loan's principal amount when the deferment period ends. Again, this is interest capitalization. And then lastly, private parent loans are a private loan where the parent or another creditworthy individual is the borrower. This allows the borrower to help the student achieve their educational goals without any additional financial burden for the student. Repayment typically begins immediately. Some lenders offer borrowers the ability to make interest payments while the student is in school. All right, so I did a really high-level overview on those programs, but now I'm going to dig into some of the details to better understand the differences, because there are very distinct differences. And I'm not going to read through this line by line, gang, but I am going to go through some of those details. So we're going to start with Federal Direct Plus loan, and this only offers a fixed interest rate, and that interest rate is currently at 9.08%, and it's one price for all. So if you are eligible for a plus loan, parent plus loan, guess what? You get a 9.8% interest rate, even if you have pristine credit. Private loans, in most cases, offer both fixed and variable rates, and private loan interest rates are based off of several factors, including credit worthiness. Each lender will look at a borrower a little differently, which may result in different lenders offering different interest rates, which is why we do recommend that folks who are looking that route to shop around. So apply to multiple private lenders. Pivoting back to Parent Plus, there is an origination fee of 4.228%, which is pretty substantial. So using round numbers, if you took out a $10,000 Parent Plus loan, only about $9,600 would actually be applied to the account. However, you would be responsible for repaying all $10,000. Private student and private parent loans usually do not have an origination fee. Applying with a cosigner on a private loan may increase the likelihood of being approved. And with a Federal Direct Parent Plus loan, it does require the parent to make payments for the life of the loan. But some lenders on private student loans offer the option to release a cosigner after meeting certain requirements. You know, there's also, I'm going to bring up a common misconception about a Federal Direct Parent Plus loan, is that oftentimes people think, well, the parent can take that out, but the student, we can just transfer it to the student. And unfortunately, that's not the case. It's in the parent's name. It is the parent's responsibility, and there is no mechanism in place to transfer that responsibility to the student. In other words, the loan is legally the parent's responsibility until it's paid in full. There is payment flexibility, and that's very important to a lot of folks. So Parent Plus loans are eligible for multiple repayment plans, including standard, graduated, and extended repayment options, federal consolidation, and some public service loan forgiveness options. You will want to go to studentaid.gov for more specific information. Private student loans and private parent loan payment options will vary by lender, so we do encourage you to contact individual lenders for their specific repayment options. A lot of times people will ask about advice on these because it's a lot of information and sometimes it's hard to digest. And I think the best advice I can give is that families should sit down and have the conversation about the cost of college. How is it being paid and by whom? Having this conversation and level setting expectations will help tremendously as you explore your options. If the parents want to shoulder the responsibility, then maybe a private parent or federal parent plus loan is the best option. If the parent wants to help, but they don't want to shoulder the responsibility, perhaps a private student loan with a parent co-signing would be the best option. Again, these conversations will help guide your path moving forward. All right, so we've already covered some of this, but just want to go through some of kind of the considerations with the Parent Plus loan. So again, Parent Plus loan, it's a loan for the parent taken out by the parent, and it can cover up to the entire financing gap. So up to 100% of the school's cost of attendance minus any other aid received. Parents can request that deferment while the student is in school. Some other things to consider is that credit history is considered. To qualify for a plus loan, you must meet additional requirements if you have adverse credit history. Borrowers are obligated for the life of the loan and cannot be released from the loan. And as crazy as it sounds, you may have to borrow additional funds to cover the loan fees. So if you have a bill of $10,000, you may actually have to borrow, like, I don't know the math off the top of my head, but maybe like $10,800 to cover those fees. So keep that in mind as well. A responsible private student or parent loan is another source of funding that gap. These loans are funded by banks and credit unions, not the federal government. A FAFSA is not required. And I did forget to mention that about the federal plus loans. A FAFSA is required. For private loans, they are not required. They are credit based. The repayment period and terms are going to vary from lender to lender. So we again encourage families to do their research to determine which lender and repayment terms best fit you and your situation. Private loans can cover up to 100% of that school certified cost of attendance minus other aid received. And because most private loans have zero origination fees, you don't need to borrow extra to cover those fees. And one of the things that I've mentioned a couple of times, but I haven't really gone into detail about is a cosigner. And some of you may be wondering, what is a cosigner? So a cosigner is any responsible third party. So it can be a parent, and oftentimes it is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be a grandparent, aunt, uncle, or really anyone. The cosigner is someone who would help secure the loan and who would only be responsible if the student fails to meet those obligations. In many cases, lenders offer a cosigner release option after meeting certain requirements. So we're almost done here, gang. A couple more slides, and then I'll open it back up to questions. So just a slide on some helpful tips. We do encourage after you complete your FAFSA, review that information on your FAFSA submission summary. Again, this is just a transcript of the FAFSA. You will need to accept or decline your aid offer with your school. And that's in the cases if you want loans or not. Again, you don't have to accept all types of aid offered. So if you just want the free money, you don't want the loans, that's perfectly fine. We do encourage you to take a look into and understand any renewal requirements for grants and scholarships. You are going to want to compare the terms, conditions, and details of each type of aid. And I would also add to that, consider more than just the dollar amount. And then compare financial aid offers looking at both the total amount of aid and the types of aid offered. And you can use an online tool or you can create your own spreadsheet for that. All right, gang. So in conclusion, this is what we would call our 1, 2, 3 approach. So start with money you don't have to pay back. So that free money, like scholarships, like grants. Explore federal financial aid by completing the FAFSA. And if there's any remaining gap, you're going to want to consider all options, including a private student loan and a Parent Plus loan. All right. And at that, I'm going to go back and we're going to answer some questions here. Can you explain what a college savings account is? Is it taxable, and how do we establish it? So college savings account is oftentimes they're called 529 accounts. And I know we had a question earlier about Florida prepaid. So these are tax deferred and oftentimes in a lot of ways tax-free accounts where you set up an account, a savings account. It's really an investment account in which you make deposits to. Those funds are invested by the organization. So I have one through for my daughter through, it's called College Advantage. Most states have them, but there are also private organizations that have them. They're pretty simple to set up. And then as you deposit over time, hopefully it gains interest, it gains returns. But what it ultimately does is, as long as those funds are used for education purposes, so again, tuition, fees, on-campus housing, meal plans, books, things like that, as long as it's used for that, the interest that you gain, the dollar amounts that are gained, you don't have to pay taxes on, which is fantastic. And oftentimes the states themselves, just the state taxes. So when you do your state income taxes, you can use whatever amount you have contributed to that savings account as a tax deduction, which again is a really nice benefit. So what it really does is it's encouraging the citizens to really save for college because it has both short-term and long-term benefits. So great question. Great question. Oh my goodness. I must have answered all your questions. We don't have any more questions, so I'll hang out for just a little bit longer. I know we're well past the top of the hour, so I do appreciate folks not only sticking with me, also asking great questions throughout, and also hanging in there as I figured out that I wasn't sharing my screen. So again, my sincerest apologies for that. I'm embarrassed by it. Hopefully didn't totally ruin the experience for you, and hopefully you still got something out of it. So I'll wait a couple more seconds. If we don't see any more questions, I think we can probably wrap it up. All right. I'm not seeing any additional questions. Folks, thank you so much for joining us again tonight. And again, a huge shout out to NSHSS for allowing me to join you all this evening and hopefully answering a lot of your questions, giving you a lot of good information. Financial aid offers can be confusing. Hopefully we've demystified that for you tonight so that as you move forward, as those offers start to roll in, and hopefully you've gotten some of them already, you're able to really sit down and say, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I know how much this is going to cost, and I know how to proceed from here. So again, on behalf of NSHSS, on behalf of Sally Mae, really do appreciate your time this evening. Best of luck moving forward, and yeah, hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you again. This concludes our webinar. Good night, everyone.